What's going on, everybody? We are back once again. My name is Liam, and I pick fights each and every week on this channel. And today we are picking fights for UFC on ABC 5, aka UFC Jacksonville, aka UFC Josh Emmett versus Ilia Topuria. I noticed, and I mentioned this in my article lead off this week, guys. This is a bankable UFC archetype of a main event. They like going back to these featherweight bangers. Think Max Holloway and Calvin Kattar. Think Calvin Kattar, Giga Chikadze. A lot of big time matchups at 145 have had a lot of just car crash kind of violence. Exactly what you want to see. High volume, people really getting after it. So as far as I'm concerned, the UFC has found a strategy that works, and we've got an action-packed main event on our hands. We have on the one hand Josh Emmett. He's coming off of a title challenge. He's coming off of an interim title challenge. Let's be fair about that. But nonetheless, he was fighting for a piece of UFC gold in his last fight. He's been a very bankable UFC underdog to this point in his career. However, there's some theories that maybe there's regression to the mean. Maybe this is a guy that is going to struggle as he gets older to continue to put together these miraculous results, especially as a huge underdog. And, on the other side, you got a surging young contender in Ilia Topuria. And this is a guy who is definitely on the come up. He's got very good skills on the ground. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He moves very well. He's slick in his wrestling and his transitions. One of the only times he looked vulnerable, besides, getting hurt on the feet, is, when he started to tire against Yusuf Zalal. But that was a short notice opponent. That was a guy who was able to really push the pace with him. But for the most part, he's normally dispatching of guys or so thoroughly dominating them that his cardio hasn't really come into play. That's something that I think maybe Josh Emmett will try to test here. But I think he's got his hands full, man. Yair Rodrigues, I was taking him against Josh Emmett last time out. I thought he was going to get it done by knockout. He ended up hurting him with a flying knee, which was exactly, how I predicted that he was going to get it done. But, credit to Josh Emmett. He's a very tough guy. He continued to try and fight through those positions. He showed some of his wrestling prowess, but his top game was really, it left something to be desired. I think that was a function of being hurt, but he was, in some near submission attempts. He was then submitted eventually by Yair Rodrigues. And I think Ilia Topuria, would be a real handful for somebody like Yair on the ground, on the mat. I think he's a very dangerous athlete, and, they both have unique skill sets, but Yair's got length. He's an awkward guy. He's extremely aggressive, but Topuria, he's very compact. He's very technical. He's very aggressive. And those guys are not easy to get after, especially in the early going, and I thought that Bryce Mitchell, was probably going to be at a disadvantage early on. I thought it was going to come down to who was stronger in that fight and who could really muscle the other guy around in the clinch. But at the end of the day, I thought that maybe the way to get to this guy is, again, to wear on his pace, to really try and drag him into deep waters, to make him second guess himself. And he seems very confident and composed. One thing that I noted over the weekend while I was on Pub Sports Radio, so shout out to those guys. I do some live commentary with those guys on Saturday nights. But, one of the things that I was talking about was Arman Tsarukyan was a minus 1,000 favorite. Okay, and he gets absolutely cracked on the chin by a guy whose primary win condition really was to win by knockout. And he had been, having a great fight. He was fighting smart, conservatively, taking the guy down, holding him in control positions. And he just let that moment on the feet, he got caught, right? But I said the reason Arman Tsarukyan was a minus 1,000 in that spot is because even in the worst case scenario, basically, the guy's like out on his feet, basically. He gets hurt so bad, he was able to take down his opponent. He was able to control the fight, consolidate position, recover. And that, to me, is really what shows that real composure, that level of, confidence when you're talking about backing a favorite. And sometimes, the question is, can a guy go deep in a fight? Does he have the cardio? Sometimes the question is, can somebody take it on the chin, like they can give it out? And for Ilia Topuria, he got hurt by Jai Herbert. And that could have been a time when you get prospect checked, and the fade check is there, and oh God, like it all falls apart. He's fighting up a weight class. He's fighting a big guy who's able to hit him with some shots he didn't expect. If you ever have heard Chael Sonnen, he hits on a note that definitely rang true based on my life and experience. But it's the matches you don't think that are going to be hard that turn out to be hard, where you really find yourself exhausted. And I think that Ilia Topuria thought he was going to style on that guy, and he was having some success, but he got caught. And, he could have folded up shop, and he didn't. He stayed tough. He stayed gritty. And he ended up really knocking the hell out of that guy for one of the best knockouts you'll ever see, period, point blank, in the UFC. It's just a shocking gunshot-like knockout. And I think this guy's ability to go to the body is not good for Josh Emmett. I think that could compromise him, especially as he gets older here. Josh is a really big hitter, and he normally enjoys a huge power advantage. He normally enjoys I would say in many matchups, even a speed advantage, but certainly an ability to counter well in the boxing and really pick his shots. I think Ilia Topuria, how did Jai Herbert get to him? He got to him with the kicks. He was able to get him upstairs with one of those big kicks. And I think that we might see, a little bit more of an Ilia Topuria boxing clinic here in some ways. And I think Josh Emmett is very good on the feet. So make no mistake. But again, we're not talking about middleweight, where Jared Cannonier is pulling off the incredible, fighting through at 39 years of age, 38 years of age, just absolutely incredible. But when you're looking at somebody like Ilia, I just feel like he's closer to his prime. I feel like he's a hungrier guy. And I've talked about this many times, guys, a theory, an angle, if you will, something that I always look at is, where is the motivation? Right. So number one, I think that the motivation spot is probably going towards Topuria, but the angle that I'm looking at here is guys coming off of title fight losses. They tend to struggle, but here's the other difference. I think that Josh Emmett is still within proximity of a title shot. He fought valiantly, right, against Yair Rodrigues. I think that he still put himself in a good position to get big fights, right? He's back in a main event here. You saw that the Calvin Kattar fight, that was a fight that could have went either way. I think that the Dan Ige fight could have went either way with Josh Emmett. So he's had a lot of really close fights that have gone, his way. Even the Shane Burgos fight, obviously it wasn't a close decision in the end, but the first round, it's starting to get a little dicey. He's getting hurt. So I just think that there's some reasons, to understand why Ilia's favored here. Do I want to go lay the -3XX? I'm not planning on doing that. Josh Emmett, still a huge hitter, still has a great record as an underdog. Those aren't things that I necessarily want to step in front of. But if you're asking me what my honest opinion is, I think that Josh Emmett's getting finished in the first 2 rounds here. I think that Ilia Topuria is going to bring too much pressure too early in the fight. I think that he is aces on the mat. I think he's very good, especially early on in a fight when he's fresh. You're going to have to survive 1, 2, 3 attempts through the series. He's very dangerous with the way he attacks. He's very systematic. One thing I always talk about when I like watching a high-level player, sometimes I think it was one of the Gracies said, I don't remember which one, but it was, good jiu-jitsu looks like step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's over. And sometimes with Ilia Topuria, that's what it looks like. He's not always getting the clean finish that he wants, but I think part of that was trying to, ingratiate himself to the fan base a little bit, get his name out there, started going out there looking for big knockouts. I think against a big hitter like Josh Emmett, it's a dangerous fight to go out there and do that. I think he'd be wise to, take a page out of Yair Rodriguez's book and say, man, maybe we should test the jiu-jitsu on this guy. Maybe he's got better offensive wrestling and jiu-jitsu than defensive. And I think that Ilia Topuria, certainly a guy that you want to have your grappling up to snuff against in this featherweight division. And I think for Josh Emmett, there were some real flaws that I saw on the mat in the last fight. He could shore that up. He's a big, tough guy. He's strong. He's physical. He's not an easy guy to hoss around or get a hold of. But I could easily see, Ilia just slipping in a very technical, tight guillotine guard pulling, and the fight's over shortly thereafter. So, I think that this fight's ending early on. I do think that Josh's best chance to win is a knockout. So shout out to everybody in the chat. We've got so many sharp people already rocking with us. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. But my guy Furio hit the nail on the head here. Topuria by sub, very live here. Tend to agree, man. I think that the knockout is possible, but I think Josh Emmett's really tough. He's going to be hella hard to put away on the feet. You're going to have to really hurt him, knock him out, knock him dead. He'll take damage. He'll walk through. We've seen that. We know that about Josh Emmett. But, if you're just out technical, in terms of skill for skill on the mat, that's where it all matters. If I'm going to break your arm, I'm going to break your arm. If you want to be a tough guy about that, then the fight's over anyway because you have a broken arm. The referee will stop it. Same thing with a choke. You can be a tough guy about a choke. You just go to sleep. So it's for me, that's the beauty of grappling, but it's only when it works, right? And if you get punched in the face once, you go from a black belt to a brown belt and all the way down. You guys know the saying. So as far as I'm concerned, this is a fight where, I think that Topuria is an honest fight at the very worst on the feet with Josh Emmett. I would favor him. I think he's the younger guy with a little bit better recoverability right now, probably a little more durability, a little bit fresher. I think he's faster on the feet. I think he's crisp with his boxing, which is where Josh Emmett likes to compete typically. And then, as far as the grappling goes, I would have to favor him. I think he's probably the better wrestler, the better grappler. Josh Emmett, it's a big physical hoss. That's the thing that, again, is making me not salivate at a minus 300 price. But the way that I put it, in my first look through this was I think that in terms of chalk that's going to roll, I think Topuria is among that. I think there's a reason. How often do you guys see these big minus 300s in UFC main events? Not very frequently. And so that's something I'm also taking note of. A lot of times UFC main events, closer line fights, but think about that last fight between Jailton Almeida and Jairzinho Rosenstrike. Again, that was just another showcase submission for Jailton Almeida. I think we might get a showcase submission for Ilia Topuria here this weekend, personal opinion. But I think that I think it's going to be a good fight. I think it's going to be a fun scrap. I think both guys could get hurt in this fight, but I just think that one guy, if he gets hurt, is in real danger of being submitted quickly because I think Topuria just has that kind of kill switch grappling. I think he's got good killer instincts, both on the feet and on the mat. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a fantastic fight, but I just think that the younger, fresher guy here is on the come up. I think he's going to get the job done. Next up, guys, let's talk about this co-main event. Got a lot of fun fights to talk about, guys. 14 fights on this card. If all holds up, knocking on wood. Going to fix my hair here. It's absolutely abysmal coming through the hat today. So appreciate each and every one of you guys rocking with me. But, guys, we got this co-main event to break down. So let's do it. Maycee Barber, Amanda Ribas, co-main event of the evening, women's flyweight division. And, I've had success betting both these women. I've also had, real heartbreaker. I bet a good chunk of change on Amanda Ribas against Katlyn Chookagian. Go to my grave thinking that she won that fight, but wasn't to be, right? And taught me a little bit about variance in WMMA. You got to be more careful, I would argue, because the chances of them finishing are a lot lower. I think that when we saw Amanda Ribas get to really dominant grappling positions against Chook, who is a Renzo Gracie brown belt, so I want to give her that credit. She's absolutely very talented on the ground, but she's kind of, with all due respect, got a little bit more of that long arm, noodly kind of build. Ribas got to really dominant positions, crucifix, this, that, and the other. Couldn't create a lot of damage, couldn't create a lot of finishing opportunities in those spots. Really concerning to me. Now, that being said, in that fight, she was a plus 160 underdog. Right. And so I bet her, and it didn't go my way, but it was a very close decision. I felt like it could have went my way. So honestly, those are the kind of bets where what I regret was the sizing. It was way too aggressive sizing. But outside of that, I don't regret the bet theoretically. I think that it still had merit. Now, in this case, Maycee Barber is not a fighter I want to be laying chalk with a lot of the time. Sometimes she doesn't always make the best decisions out there. Sometimes she doesn't always start hot in a fight. Sometimes she'll give away the first round. She'll get hit cleanly in round one. She won't always exhibit the best fundamentals. But that being said, she has power for WMMA. Kind of a rare feature. She's got some wins by KO, TKO in the UFC. She can attack girls with pressure, aggression, and she could steal fights on the cards that she doesn't even deserve, like grease out close fights. She's kind of good at doing that. So for me, I think that Maycee Barber is an interesting underdog here. And I could tell you guys why. Amanda Ribas for me at 115 pounds, the danger, the compromise is her chin. I think that her chin suffers. I think she's more vulnerable to being knocked out at 115 pounds. She cut weight. She got knocked out by Polyana Viana. She got knocked out by Marina Rodrigues, two girls that have longer arms, two Brazilian girls that really know how to throw down and exert themselves with some power. And she got lit up a little bit by Katlyn Chookagian as well. She's very small in terms of her reach. And I'm looking right now at the Tapology. I'm seeing that they have about the same reach and height. But I do think that Maycee Barber just has some physical strength and more power on the feet. So I actually think Amanda Ribas is more technical. If you guys remember the Mackenzie Dern fight, she absolutely just pieced her apart with a jab, just absolutely made it look easy, touched her up with the boxing. And Mackenzie has some power too, but Mackenzie wasn't able to close distance. She wasn't able to get inside of her range. And honestly, Amanda Ribas was able to compete with her in the grappling in that fight, which I think, we've realized that Mackenzie Dern is an elite world-class grappler, but that doesn't mean she's invincible. And that doesn't mean there aren't girls out there with world-class elite credentials in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu of their own that can compete with her. Verna Jandiroba, Amanda Ribas. So just there's other girls that maybe they're not in a pure jiu-jitsu contest going to compete with Mackenzie Dern on the mats. But if you introduce some punches, some kicks, some knees, some elbows, some space, some cages, it changes the dynamic completely. So I think that for Maycee Barber, if this was a jiu-jitsu competition, I'm taking Amanda Ribas, right? But if we're taking just, you could do brawling tactics. You could punch to the body. You could punch upstairs. I would be a little bit worried at the price that Amanda Ribas chin could give her some worries at 125 here against a girl like Maycee Barber. I do think that Amanda Ribas has some takedown upside here. I think she's got potential to win this first round. So I understand why she's favored. But the truth is, I just see Maycee Barber as this fight goes on competing. I don't think she's very easy to finish historically. I think that Maycee's going to really try and make this a scrap. And I think that if this fight gets dirty, greasy, grimy, it's going to look like a Maycee Barber fight more often than an Amanda Ribas fight. I think if it's a clean technical performance and you're blown away by somebody, it's probably going to be Amanda Ribas because it is possible that she just wipes her out on the ground. I do think that her grappling is high level. I do think that, we've seen at times the takedown defense of Maycee Barber be a little bit suspect, but this is going to be a real test for her, especially in terms of the physicality at 125. If this one goes sideways, don't be surprised if Amanda Ribas is back down at 115. Because the truth is that Chook fight I thought could have went her way, and the fact that it didn't also told me a little bit about where they're kind of feeling about her, where they're positioning her. I don't know that they're positioning her for success right now. So I'd like to see Amanda get back on track. But again, it's a lot to ask, I feel like, against a talented girl like Maycee Barber, who snuck one out before, against popular girls like Miranda Maverick that a lot of people thought were going to get the better of her. And I even thought maybe Miranda deserved that decision. Maycee Barber got the nod. Very young girl, continues to make potential improvements here. Also distancing herself more and more from an injury that she suffered earlier in her career. So at 25 years of age, let's see what she can produce here over the weekend as a plus 150 underdog. Next up, we've got Jacksonville's own Austen Lane taking on Justin Badman Tafa. And I cashed nicely on Justin Badman Tafa last time out. Hit a nice little correlated parlay on Justin Tafa in the under 2.5, I think it was. If I'm wrong, it was the under 1.5. Didn't matter. The fight was over shortly thereafter with our unfortunate brother, Parker Porter. Shout out to the guy, Parker Porter. Great family man, got back in the win column over Braxton Smith. So shout out to that guy representing CT, the big bad Beast Coast, quite well. But in terms of this fight, guys, the bad man, Justin Tafa, he's kind of just a barnyard brawler, really. I don't think I'm sold on his ground game, his wrestling, his cage clinch, his IQ. I just think that he's a dangerous guy who's got big power in his hands. You put him in there with a guy like Parker, who, with all due respect, is a little bit slower, a little bit more hittable, a little bit more predictable at the time. And Parker lost some weight and did some things to speed up as well. So God bless him for it. Made a lot of the right choices athletically, and I think that showed in his last performance. But I think that for Justin Tafa, he's not a guy who you think of peak athletic performance. He does have some UFC experience. It's against some of the lowest level guys that you'll see. And so you're actually seeing Austen Lane come in here with a 12-3 record. He is 35 years of age, so he's 6 years older. He is definitely, in danger of getting knocked the hell out, but he does have a huge reach advantage. He's going to be the bigger, taller guy. And to be honest with you, I would be more surprised if Tafa mixed in wrestling and grappling than Austen Lane. So that for me at least makes it an interesting proposition, right? Why would they put this guy in Jacksonville to get knocked the hell out by Justin Tafa? That's an interesting question by me. Why? I honestly don't even want to say this because I feel like this is gold, but because you 44 homies are rocking with me live, I'm even going to share this with you guys. Why is Austen Lane by submission only plus 700 in a heavyweight fight? Y'all answer me that. I don't know. Maybe it's because he might attempt some takedowns here against a guy who's really not so good on the ground. So I think that's an interesting thing here. Greg Hardy is a guy, who's kind of like Justin Tafa, but Justin Tafa is a more natural fighter on the feet. But Greg Hardy is a better athlete, so it's kind of like a take your pick there. Greg Hardy, he's capable of knocking out a lot of guys. I mean, he almost knocked out what's his name? Tai Tuivasa. What a different conversation we'd all be having then, right? And instead, he got sent to absolute hell because he can give it, but he can't really take it too, as my guy Dan Levy, Best Fight Picks, would say. So I think that was the problem. I think that for Greg Hardy, throwing good punches wasn't the problem. He could throw, he could hit somebody. He went 15 minutes dancing with Volkov, right? But when it came down to it, when he got hit hard, he wanted out of there. He's shelled up and things like that. And, he's out there getting that paycheck and he's still doing it in whatever boxing thing he's doing on the side. And, he's got a lot of problems to deal with of his own. He doesn't need any more from me, right? Certainly nothing I could do to the guy. But as far as I'm concerned, Tafa, he's a fun story. He's a guy that can always win a fight by knockout. But I just think that he's also a guy who I'm not really trusting down the stretch. He's been outworked before. Let's pull up his UFC record. But I believe he's 3-3 in the organization, if my memory serves. That's right. He beat Parker Porter, Harry Hunsucker, and Juan Adams. Guys, can you think of 3 worse wins, a worse trio of wins in the UFC in history? If you guys can come up with it, that would be sick. I mean, Parker Porter is an elite legendary win. That's fair for sure. But Juan Adams and he struggled in the UFC. I don't want to throw dirt on Juan Adams. He's building his way back up and working hard. God bless him. But I mean, Harry Hunsucker, he's had a tough go of it, right? Like these are not guys you're thinking of as the next UFC heavyweight title contender, right? And admittedly, he doesn't have a lot of experience. But again, Austen Lane at 35, 36 years of age, he's got the experience he needs, right? It's either right now or it's never. So, I think that this is a fight where, I'm looking at the underdog or passing here. Just laying 65% on a guy who is basically just a swang and bang fighter on the feet, who's 6-3, and 3-3 in the UFC. It's just not for me. It's not to say it's not going to win this weekend. So I wish you guys all the best of luck, no matter how you fall on it. But just for me, theoretically, that's not how I approach the game. I'd need plus money in a fight like this to even consider getting involved in. We've got a guy with twice the professional wins, same amount of professional losses, and he's basically as ready as he's going to be as a fighter right out of the package right now. Then you got the more durable banger on the other side. So I think it's an interesting one. I'm going to do more due diligence, though, obviously, before I part with my money. But that's why you're here for my first look. I'm just giving you guys my honest reaction to some of these fights and these lines as well. And we're going to keep it rolling. Next up on the main card, guys, David Onama is back taking on Gabriel Santos. Very fun fight. And what did I say about archetypal featherweight bangers? We got another one here, and it's on the main card. I want to just say shout out to the chat, guys. We got a lot of people in here rocking with us. I want to shout out to some people here that are dropping questions, comments, concerns. You guys are welcome to throw those my way. I'm going to try and field some of those. Big Bird UFC says, hey, Liam, I will be at the fights live. I was thinking of throwing the price of my tickets on Justin Tafa by submission. Is that a good bet? I would say that is a dicey bet at best, my brother. I would be looking more towards the fight ends by sub if you're trying to get wild, if you're trying to get frisky. Because it's going to be a wide number because you're dealing with heavyweights. And, the books are not giving Tafa a great chance to win by sub. They're not giving Lane a great chance to win by sub. So I would probably look for a really off-price fight ends by sub. Again, just from a gambling theory point of view, that's what I always look for, more outs. If I can get more outs on the same play that I want, and sacrifice just a touch of equity, in terms of that plus number, that's fine with me. As long as I can give myself more outs, I'd rather win more often. And that's just something from a psychological perspective too, that I find beneficial. Everybody to each their own. But next up, it's two guys that are both under 30 years old. So you got two prospects here at featherweight, two guys that between them are 20-3. So not guys that are used to losing very often, right? But David Onama recently fallen on a little bit of hard times, lost to Nate Landwehr by majority decision. Nate wasn't really interested in finishing there, had a lot of dominant positions, had a lot of big shots, clearly won that fight, let's say, by the end of it. But, he tried to give it away a couple of times too, just fighting like a fool, fighting a little bit goofy. Nate Landwehr, tough as all hell, though, and showed that again against Dan Ige. But back to this, Onama got the win over Armfield. That's a win that he replicated from his regional scene. That really doesn't tell us too much. Shout out to Armfield, but again, a guy coming up a weight class, I believe, to compete. So that's not really what I want to see in terms of something that's going to sell me on a guy. Beating Gabriel Benitez, that was a nice enough win, but Gabriel Benitez has really not looked like himself lately in the UFC, with all due respect. Currently on a 2-4 run in his last 6 fights. And his last 4 wins in the UFC are Charlie Ontiveros, Justin James, Umberto Bondanai, and Jason Knight. So we're really just on a different level of competition here. And then Mason Jones, right? He lost the Mason Jones fight, but it was close and competitive. And then Mason Jones ended up losing out and losing his spot in the UFC, unfortunately, as well. Moving on to something else. So our guy Gabriel Santos comes in from LFA. I believe he was a champion over there. Absolutely, he won the vacant tournament championship via 3rd round stoppage over Jose Dalano. So a lot of tape that I'm going to have to go back and rewatch here. I think I have a little bit of his tape done. He fought Elvis Bernaire, another guy that's been on my radar in the past. So this is a guy that, he's kind of been loosely on my radar. I obviously watch LFA from time to time as well. But I think Lerone Murphy's a really talented guy. I thought that was an impressive showing from Gabriel Santos in his UFC debut. And yeah, I think Rick the Ruler kind of sums up a lot of people's feeling. Onama let me down last time out. And, that's something I always want to be weary of, is a little bit of recency bias. But I do think that, from a matchup standpoint, I like the Santos side. What I don't love is the price, right? Because he's kind of right in that buster range. They kind of like to bust something around that -225, -250 if they can. There's other options, though, on this card, and we'll discuss some of those as well. But just, again, I like to give you guys some of the theoretical nuggets here on the First Look show, because I'm really focused on matchup when we go to the Bets and Banter show later in the week. And guys, later on in this show, a little tease for you. I do have 2 great guests to announce. Excited to announce them later on in the program. But for now, let's finish talking about this fight. And I think that overall, I have to favor Santos here because I think he's a better guy on the ground. And I think Nate Landwehr could have finished that fight on the ground at various points if he really wanted to. And, I felt like he was a little bit more committed to the showmanship, committed to, making it fun. And we could see improvements here from Onama, but I feel like his ground game is a little bit suspect at this point. I want to see more from him on the ground before I believe in it fully. And Santos is a guy, he's got power on the feet. He's a dangerous guy there. Doesn't have all of his wins on the ground, but he does just strike me as the guy who's going to have the superior ground game here. I think he might be able to scramble a little bit better. I think he might be able to push the pace a little bit harder down the stretch. So he might be dealing with, a handful in round one. It might be dangerous, dicey times. And I think that this is the real path for Onama as well. I think that his knockout ability is not to be slept on. He does have real power on the feet. It's bailed him out a couple times as well. But I just have a feeling this is a tough one, for our guy. I just think Onama, he's kind of had the book written a little bit on him in the UFC, and he hasn't proven that much in the wins at this point. So it's not like I'm closing the door on a guy like David Onama. I'm not anxious to go out there and fade him, but I just have a gut feeling that Santos is going to win this fight via submission. So I'm going to stay off it for now and wait and see what the domestics open up that prop at, but that's kind of just my gut reaction, how I'm feeling. So shout out to our guy, Axel Fox, says, "Sup, Liam, first time here. Welcome to the show. If you guys are new, appreciate you. If you get subscribed, you will not be disappointed. We're talking fights here all the time. Bring on the best guests that I possibly can. Try and, give you guys multiple perspectives on these fights. But right now what we're doing is just breaking down these fights at first glance, what I think about them, how I feel about them from a betting perspective, seeing if there's any meat on the bone. And because there's 14 great fights to talk about, we can move right along to the next one. So just appreciate you being here. And thank you to all the new people that are rocking. MMA Joey, shout out. I just appreciate the support, appreciate everybody giving the show a chance. And I hope you're not disappointed. We got a lot of great fights to talk about, and I think it's going to be a great show here on out. So thank you guys to everybody rocking in the chat. Sharpest chat in the game. Say it each and every time. Mean it each and every time. Thank you guys. Next up, Brendan All-In Allen taking on Bruno Blindado Silva. This is a really fun fight here because, these guys both kind of have an element of each other's kryptonite in a way, right? Where Brendan Allen is kind of like a train that gets rolling downhill. He starts making real weird decisions in round one. His chin's not always perfect. He could get overwhelmed by shots at times. But when you see this guy start rolling downhill on somebody, they just look like they are in hell. They don't want to be there. And we saw that bigly in his last fight against Andre Muniz. I don't know if people know just how good Andre Muniz is on the ground. I think that he's as good as advertised. I think people, just see the result of fatigue. Fatigue makes cowards of us all, and Andre Muniz can't keep the same pace that Brendan Allen could keep, and Brendan Allen could do just enough to stay safe, to stay patient, to be composed in all positions with a really dangerous guy, and that's high-level stuff, man. We've seen it multiple times now from Brendan Allen, put in dangerous, compromised positions where he could be submitted, where he's nearly submitted. He survives, he advances, he escapes, and he comes back to submit the other guy. He's done it multiple times. So I think that for me, that's something that I'm really impressed by. That's something that I got to take note of. I have systemically discounted Brendan Allen. I've thought that, big pressure spots were going to get to him. I thought that he did not, like the big shots to the body. I thought that there was a lot of things against Curtis, against these guys where he's getting finished, where I didn't like what I saw. And I had some tickets on the ends by knockout and things. I had a couple good numbers along the way. But just overall, my read on Brendan Allen hasn't always been there, right? And especially the last fight, I thought Andre Muniz was going to submit the guy. Just no doubt in my mind. And he's better than I thought. He's just better than I thought he was on the ground. He's smarter and he's more technical. The UFC really likes the guy too. That's something that I'm also taking note of. I always try and take note of who the UFC is getting behind, who they like, who they talk about, who the announcers talk about, how they talk about them on broadcast. I listen to everything. And they love this guy, Brendan Allen. He takes a lot of fights. He takes dangerous fights. He talks about the fights. He's not afraid to run his mouth a little bit. He'll get in somebody's face. He's got a fun style. He's not afraid to go out on his shield. He does a lot of things right. He's got a lot of experience and he's young. So these are the kind of guys that the UFC not afraid to invest in. Guys that say yes, guys that want to be out there, guys that are willing to take on these crazy fights, crazy challenges, short notice, main event, this, that, and the other way. I think that shows a lot of character from him as well. So I just don't want to keep sleeping on this guy, Brendan Allen. That being said, Bruno Blindado Silva hits like an absolute truck. He could lose every second of a fight Go watch the Andrew Sanchez fight, right? He's not winning a minute of that fight. He's getting taken down left, right, center, here, there, everywhere. And then as soon as the fight turns, it's over because he's such a heavy-handed guy. Wellington Turman, he takes his back. He looks like he's in prime position. Everything's going gravy. He falls out of position. Bing, boom, 1-2. It's all over. From the top position. Bop, bop, bop. Just starts raining on him and the fight's over. So he's got thunderous, terrifying ground and pound. He's got murderous punching on the feet. That being said, he got absolutely diced to smithereens by my guy Gerald Meerschaert, who moves in slow motion. So that is something that we got to take into into account. What we have to realize here, Brendan Allen's a very dangerous guy, but his kryptonite is big power. So in this fight, we want to see Brendan Allen be really smart and judicious. We want to see him go for takedowns. We want to see him get on top of this guy because Bruno Silva has a black belt, and the black belt that he got, literally they gave it to him after he got taken down 1,000,000 times and then eventually got up to his feet when Andrew Sanchez was on death's door of cardio and finished him. You know, this is a guy that he's definitely got skills on the ground. Don't get me wrong. But just the level on the ground is so vastly different here, in my opinion. And I think that Brendan Allen is not as dangerous on the feet, but he does have a lot of the same tools that Gerald Meerschaert used to really neutralize this guy. Big kicks to the body, right? Switching stances, mixing it up a little bit, in and out of range. They come from the same gym now, right? I know that our guy Gerald Meerschaert used to train over with Duke Rufus and the guys, but now he's training in South Florida, right? Just like our guy. So I think that for me, you know, Brendan Allen is probably the side here. I like Brendan Allen style-wise, but I can't advocate, honestly, laying the chalk because then we come back and we see Silva look so good in his next fight, you know, after looking terrible against GM3. And I say that with all due respect because I love GM3. And GM3, round 3, he could come back on anybody, right? He loves doing that to people. But he was whooping his ass the whole fight. And that was the thing that made me think, whoa, is Bruno Silva like shot? What happened to him? And then Bruno Silva all of a sudden came back and just absolutely, you know, put a bop into our guy, Brad Tavares, right? So I think that this is a tricky one. You know, it's not one at middleweight. You don't want to get out over your skis, right? Because Brendan Allen, we've seen it before. He can be knocked out, period, point blank, 100% at the UFC level. But, and there's always that but, you know, I just think that the levels on the ground, the guy who's got more momentum, the guy who's moving in the right direction is Brendan Allen right now. So I lean Brendan Allen here, but no bet for me. I do think this fight's going to end inside the distance, though. Both these guys just have a really dangerous style. You know, they kind of play with fire a little bit. Next up, we got the prelim headliner. So we'll take a sip of water to that. Cheers to the sharpest chat in the game. And we ride Neil Magny taking on Philip Rowe. Now, I would call Neil Magny a fish, as I have on this program before, but I don't know that Phil Rowe fully qualifies for the Shark moniker. So for now, we're just going to have to call it Neil Magny against Philip Rowe. And these are two guys that both have shown a little bit of, you know, obviously skill and promise in the UFC, but also some flaws, right? I think with Phil Rowe, his chin is a little bit suspect. You know, I don't know if he is able to stay off of his back all the time. Sometimes he gets taken down a little bit too easily. I think that Neil Magny is going to present some problems to him, especially if he's able to get this fight in the clinch. You know, these are two guys that are similar in age. In terms of fight years, obviously, Neil Magny has a lot more fight years on him. And I think that Neil does some things well. You know, he mutes offense from his opponents. He's able to control them. If he's able to get the waist lock, he's able to mess up their timing and make them frustrated, make them fight emotionally at times. I just think that Phil Rowe can match him in a lot of physical dimensions. You know, these guys both the same height and the same reach according to Tapology. And, you know, you got the guy who's younger by 3 years. And granted, he's not as experienced, but, you know, who's getting better looks on the ground consistently? I mean, it might be hard to argue Phil Rowe is not doing that. He's definitely gotten higher level and higher profile grappling matches. You guys all saw Arman Sarukian and our guy Neto BJJ going at it last weekend. And Neto BJJ submitted Neil Magny with the shocking quickness with a guillotine choke. When they went at CFFC, I talked about it when I talked about Neto BJJ last week. So he's obviously got skill. But again, Neil Magny's a welterweight, and he's got lightweights bumping up and choking him out very quick. And again, high level, but Phil Rowe is not a slouch at all on the mat. So, I think that this is an honest fight. I think that both guys have had chin problems. Neil Magny, you wouldn't say that always in his career. He's been very tough and historically quite durable, but I thought he got badly hurt in the Max Griffin fight. I thought he was nearly finished there. I bet Max Griffin. Couldn't believe that one went against me, to tell you the truth. So, yeah, I think honestly, I think that you're wrong about this one, my brother. I don't think Rowe is terrible on the ground. I do think his takedown defense is bad, but I think that his ground game is actually better than Neil Magny. I do believe that. But Neil Magny, it's going to really depend, I think, who gets on top consistently, and if Neil Magny at any point gets hurt in this fight. Neil, when he's imposing his game plan, he's great. But I do think that when he starts to be on the receiving end, it could change the dynamics considerably. So it's going to be a tricky fight. I agree with this assessment as well from our guy WW. Says Rowe is a lanky bastard. He really is. He matches Neil Magny in terms of that physicality in ways that most guys just don't. So my guy Jewish Better likes the Fresh Prince here. I think that's very interesting. But yeah, I just can't get the images out of my mind. Neil Magny, let's look at his recent run in the UFC. Loses to Gilbert Burns via triangle choke in round 1. No skin off your nose there. Loses to Shavkat Rakhmonov via guillotine choke. That's the freest money I think we'll ever get in the UFC, truthfully. Daniel Rodrigues, he beat by Darce choke in round 3. Good win. Max Griffin beat by split decision. I don't know about all that. And then he beat Jeff Neal. So back to 2021. I mean, 2021, he was looking aces. But coming off a couple losses recently, I guess he hasn't taken that much damage. He's mostly been getting out grappled in these fights. That's kind of interesting. So, I'll be curious what some of these props look like. Because, yeah, I'd probably only be looking to play the props here. Phil Rowe, not a guy I'm looking to invest in long term. But I think he might be the slight value spot here. But Neil Magny, I remember when he was fighting Daniel Rodrigues, his ITV was like plus 685. Insane for a welterweight fight. And Neil Magny is typically priced like that because he's a decisionator. But I think later in his career, he's trying to get a little bit more aggressive. And they're kind of giving him more of that gatekeeper role. And so I think it's going to open up more opportunities for Magny to finish and get finished, as he gets older. Interesting, though. Next up, we've got another potential finish looming at welterweight. Yeah, I think Big Bird is right about that. Magny is a bad KO waiting to happen. Tend to agree with that assessment. We've got Randy Brown taking on Wellington Turman. Wellington Turman out of the Connecticut camp with Glover Teixeira and the boys, Alex Pereira and the guys, although Pereira is now training with Sean Strickland. He's doing his thing. Randy Brown, rude boy. Things went sideways so quick against our guy Jack Maddalena. Lost via rear naked choke there in the very first round. Wow. That was a club and sub. That was a getting beat up on the feet type of finish. Everything went wrong there. You look back at the win streak that led him there, beat Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Good win, fun win, got the finish there, but also, a little bit opportunistic club and sub of a guy who's been around for a long time. Jared Gooden, guy who's really struggled at the UFC level. Chaos Williams, fun guy who's kind of starting to struggle at this UFC level a little bit, still getting the wins though. And he beat him by split decision. So more power to him. Francisco Trinaldo, the old man legend. At the time of that fight, it was a 12-year age gap in favor of our guy, Randy Brown. He gets the unanimous decision. He's also way freaking bigger. Massaranduba is way small. And then he got finished brutally by JDM. Prior to that, he got finished brutally by the death dealer of 170 pounds, Vicente Luque. Prior to that, he got finished by Nico Price. And prior to that, he lost to Bilal Muhammad. So no terrible losses really along the way. He just has shown himself to be a little bit questionable, I would say, with the chin, because JDM hurt him real bad, and he's a good fighter, but he hurt him real bad. I would argue that, he's shown damage in some of these other fights, even the fights that he won. Vicente Luque brutally finished him. Nico Price, hammer fist from bottom, one of the very rare times that's happened in UFC history, only a handful of times. So he's had a lot of really tough fights, a lot of grueling fights, and he's not young, at 32 here. He's not old, but he's not young. And Wellington Turman here, on the other hand, is 26 years of age. He's a younger guy. Turman, I think his chin is really suspect. That's the thing that's always given me real pause with the guy since that Bruno Silva fight where I bet him and then he got knocked out instantly with one punch. I mean, he got finished by Andrew Sanchez. That might be Andrew Sanchez's only finished win in the UFC. I'm checking if that's true. Absolutely true. Not since the Ultimate Fighter. So Andrew Sanchez's only finished win in the UFC is over Wellington Turman. He lost to Carl Robertson, of all fucking people. Excuse my language, but I really had to say that. He lost to Carl Robertson, who I believe is in prison right now. God bless him for it. I hope that he beats the case. But I believe Carl Robertson got locked up, and he lost to Carl Robertson via split decision. He beat Marcus Perez, who has moved to professional pillow fighting. Tough guy, but I mean, that should say everything. He got absolutely brutally finished by Bruno Silva, like I was telling you. He beat Sam Alvey via split decision. I believe there was point deductions in that fight. And then he submitted Misha Serkinov before losing a decision to Andre Petroski. So for me, this is a fight where, Andre Petroski, that loss is kind of like not that bad for Turman. The one thing that you don't like to see is Petroski, kind of a muscle hoss, kind of a grappling archetype, muscling him around a little bit. But Randy Brown, he's a big frame for the welterweight division. I think that's important to note. So Turman, he's going to have a little bit of size to deal with here. But in terms of who's the better pure grappler, I'd have to think Wellington Turman is probably better. But Randy, he's got a lot of physical intangibles. He's got a 6-inch reach advantage. He's 3 inches taller here. He's got more UFC experience. I just think Randy's a better fighter, and I don't like his chin. I don't love everything to back him at this chalk price. But again, you're asking for my opinion, who I think is going to win this fight. I ultimately think Randy Brown is more likely to win this fight by knockout. I think he has a chance, not a high chance, but a chance to win this fight by submission. I would be surprised by that, but not stunned. And I think he could win it by decision. I think he could just outpoint this guy, be better at distance, take advantage. But do I want to trust him? Again, he's kind of in that buster type of range. I don't think that Turman is the one to test Brown's chin, but I do think maybe he could test his grappling. I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility. We did just see JDM submit him. He's been submitted before, mostly club and sub type scenarios, but still, I think it's worth paying attention to here because Wellington Turman is no joke on the ground, and at 170, he's probably going to be pretty strong. And Randy Brown, you got to sacrifice a little bit of durability, I think, to be his size at welterweight. So, again, just something to pay attention to. Turman's not really that guy, but, it's just Randy Brown is the kind of guy who has lost fights in dominant positions before. He's lost fights that he was winning clearly, and he's been hurt really bad in a few of them. So just some things to worry about. But I do think he's the superior fighter, better skills. Next up, we've got a 155-pound fight between what some people would say is my lookalike. Not sure I fully see it, but do appreciate it nonetheless. our guy Mateusz Rebecki, and Loic Radzhabov. So neither one of these guys is going to give me an easy name to pronounce here, but we've got two guys in the lightweight division that are both looking to, kind of take that step forward and really cement themselves in the UFC, right? We've got on the one hand, our guy Loic Radzhabov's coming off a decision win over Esteban Ribovics, the previously undefeated Argentinian fighter, who came into the UFC with a knockout win over Thomas Paul on the Contender Series. He's actually scheduled to take on Kamwela Kirk at UFC 290. So we'll be seeing him again soon. But for Esteban, he doesn't really have a robust body of work. So that doesn't tell us very much about Loic. But what we do know is he was a very, hit and miss kind of guy in the PFL. He's got some good wins, beat Chris Wade while he was over there. Mostly was a good loss on people's record. Alex Martinez, Natan Schultz, Rashid Magomedov, and Roush Manfio all decisioning him. So this should be an interesting scrap because Rebecki on the other side, he's a really domineering grappler, and that's his archetype. That's what he's very good at. He's got, decent striking on the feet, nothing special, I would say, but he's tough. He'll come forward. He swings hooks. He likes to get after it. And, I thought that the win over Rodrigo Ligio was not a win to sneeze at. I thought that was a pretty good win for him on Contender Series. And, since that fight, we've seen our guy come back with a knockout win, Rodrigo Ligio. He's not a bad fighter, but he's just a guy that when you get his back early on, he could really be in some trouble. So I bet Rebecki by sub in that fight on the Contender Series. But now we're dealing with a different thing. This guy Radzhabov, he's never been finished. So I don't really like to bet finish props when that is the case. Plus, we just saw this guy go to the decision against Nick Fiore. Although we did just see Nick Fiore is tough as hell, man. Chase Hooper beat the shit out of that guy, and he stayed in the fight, and he wants to be there. He's only 25 years of age. He's still young. He's still developing. He's still growing, and he's still damn tough. So I think Nick Fiore still could have a bright future, New England cartel, but maybe he just got to the big show a little too early at 25 years of age. That's the same age I am. I just turned 25. I'm telling you, I think it's a crazy thing that he's out there running it with these guys who are ready to go right now. So more power to him, big blessings, but it's a lot to ask, and Mateusz Rebecki, he maybe dealt with some octagon jitters. He maybe dealt with a little bit of that pressure coming in with a lot of hype and expectations. I think this kind of return to normalcy where people don't really expect as much of him could be good. I think that this is a fight where people expect it to be competitive. A lot of people are on Loic here. And listen, I understand that. Tajikistan been on fire a little bit in the UFC, right? Tajikistan and Mexico. I don't know what's in the water, right? People are doing well. But I think Rebecki is really, really good on the ground, guys. I was excited for this guy to get to the UFC when I saw his regional tape, when I saw what he was doing. He's got a lot of experience, 17-1. Loic, he's got a couple more fights than him. But again, this is a guy who was fighting tough fights, tough guys. I feel like he's coming in ready to rumble. And, I just think he might be just superior in the wrestling and grappling. And I think that's where this fight is probably going to be decided. So I'm going to do more research, more due diligence. Certainly not going to be playing Rebecki here if he's minus 150 or something after that last performance. But I think if he dropped down to, close to pick'em price, I would potentially consider it. I think both these guys could gas here. Like my guy Danny P, UFC says, he thinks Loic can fight through it better. Interesting stuff. I really just want to see in my tape study how good Loic is at defending the takedowns. He lost to a lot of guys with rushing sounding last names. I think Rebecki, when he's on top, he's kind of a real difficult guy to move. He's a very heavy top player. He can be very skillful, especially when he's fresh. And I think that could be a real problem for him. So interesting fight. Only a 2-year age gap here, 4-inch height gap and 2-inch reach advantage favoring Loic Radzhabov here. So the Killcliff FC representative, if Tapology is to be believed, I think all of that is an interesting. It makes for an interesting dynamic. So two guys that know how to wrestle, but I'm going to do my due diligence here and come back to it. So my guy Furio, sharp individual, thinks Loic has to be the side at plus money. Just worried Rebecki will be the one going first. Yeah, and honestly, for me, sometimes it just comes down to like who I really believe is going to be the better wrestler on the night. Because if you can bail yourself out with a takedown, it just can change everything. And I do think that Rebecki, again, he's one of these guys. Maybe his wrestling's not up to snuff. Maybe it's not the best in the division. But if he's able to take you down, he might just be able to park it on top and hold you with that top pressure. So that's kind of what I'm interested in seeing here this weekend. Maybe it's a good experiment here to just sit back and watch this one play out and gather some more data about two guys that are both fairly new to UFC audiences. Next up, we've got Tabatha Ricci at 115 pounds, women's strawweight here, taking on Gillian the Savage Robertson. And guys, I just want to say 58 people rocking with us live at midnight. And Kai Quackenbush, last time that you asked that, brother, please do not ask again. Just trying to focus on MMA. But I do appreciate that you're here rocking with us. As far as I'm concerned, I think that what the deal is with these two ladies is you've got two women that are both very talented on the ground. I think Tabatha Ricci is a girl that has demonstrated her skills on the mat. I remember a lot of people wanted to fade her with Polyana Viana, and I thought that was a tough matchup for Polyana because, again, talking about bailing yourself out with takedowns. Do you guys remember watching that fight? I mean, it was simply takedown city for Tabatha Ricci throughout that contest. And, against Jessica Panay, a lot of people, again, were anxious to fade this girl. But she goes out there, she gets the submission of a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So I think she's maybe starting to find her own a little bit in the octagon. You look at her only loss in the UFC, and she gets finished via standing TKO punches against Manon Ferro, up a weight class at 125 pounds. She was clearly undersized for that bout. Manon Ferro is not a low-level girl at 125, right? If you're going to step up in weight class, you'd hope at least the skill, is favorable for you. No. And when you're moving up in weight, and you're a striker, that normally works out okay because you're faster, you can move around, you can, find your opportunities. But the opposite really is true when you're talking about, I even lost my train of thought there a little bit. But when I'm dealing with a girl like Manon Ferro, she's a really dangerous girl, high level on the feet. Oh, I remember. We're dealing with a girl who's a grappler, excuse me. And so when you're a grappler and you try and move up in weight, that's brutal for you, right? It's just not going to make it easier. She couldn't really get her takedowns going. Manon Ferro's beating her up on the feet. It was a disaster from the beginning. She only took the fight to get into the UFC, right? We all know how this works. Every manager is basically just trying to get their athlete into the UFC by hook or by crook. And so they take these matchups on short notice where they get decked and, it plummets their stock and they got to rebuild. So now Ricci has rebuilt into a considerable UFC fighter, but she's still not very big here. Again, we're pulling up the topology. She's going to be at a 4-inch height disadvantage. She's going to be at a 1-inch reach disadvantage here. And both these women are the same age. So Gillian Robertson's coming down here from 125 pounds to 115 pounds. She might be able to leverage some of that size. Plus, she's got good grappling ability. The one thing is, I don't know that we've ever seen Tabatha Ricci exploited in the wrestling and in the grappling. I believe she comes from a judo background as well as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background. I'll fact check myself on these details before Thursday's stream. But again, if my memory serves, this is a girl who's not very easy to take down. And she also has very good top game. So my question, again, for this matchup then becomes the defining factor of, do I think Gillian Robertson is going to take down Tabatha Ricci? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. When I think about this fight, I think Tabatha Ricci, why did she do so good against Polyana Viana? She did so good because Polyana Viana is a dangerous striker on the feet, but she's content to play off of her back, and she was easy to take down, right? So easy to exploit with the takedowns. Gillian Robertson, I don't think of as easy to take down. Jessica Panay, I don't think of necessarily as easy to take down. She's kind of tricky, you know. Think about Lupi Godinez and these women that have struggled to just easily take down Jessica Penne. You know, she makes it tricky, awkward, looking for different positions. So I think that it's a really interesting fight because if Robertson is able to dominate the grappling, I think that she will be able to win the minutes. You know, that's the thing, WW. For me, it's really just it's a grappling dynamic here. So I'm going to do a little bit more study. You know, I'm going to do a little bit more of a study here on these women. But I do think of Tabatha Ricci as a real prospect at 28. She just doesn't have the same level of experience. You know, Gillian Robertson has been molded by hard UFC experience. You know, she's been beat up a couple times. She's been humbled a few times. She's had to learn a few lessons. She's had people try and gouge her eyes out and shit. 12-7, right? But recently, finish over Piera Rodrigues, finish over Maria Agapova, lost to JJ Aldrich. What was the defining factor there? JJ Aldrich has low hips, low center of gravity, not easy to take down, wasn't able to get the win there. Fundamental boxing on the other side. Priscilla Cachoeira, you know, she was able to get the win there. Caitlin Chukagian was able to get the win in submission underground, so more power to her. Miranda Maverick loses the decision there. I believe she got taken down a number of times, if my memory serves. Lost to Talia Santos, my girl. You know, the unofficial UFC champion, Talia Santos. I mean, they didn't give it to her, but she beat the girl too. You know, they'll never give her the credit. Polyana Botello got her by, you know, decision there. So she hasn't always been an insta sub on the ground either, Gillian Robertson. I think that's something to take note of here. But recently she's been getting a lot more aggressive, been getting a lot more finishes. And, you know, she's a dangerous fighter. The Goat Shed, you know, I don't know if I love that gym, but I also don't know how many high-level fighters right now are coming out of Paragon. Let me take a look and see if they've got any active high-level pros. Yeah, I'm not seeing a lot of high-level MMA pros that are training at Paragon either. So that's something to take note of. I want to see, you know, what I'll do before I come on the Thursday stream is I'll also do an Instagram stock and see where they're training right now. Tapology is not always up to date, as you guys are probably well aware. So, yeah, I think that that's something I'm going to be definitely taking a look at here as the fight gets a little bit closer. So shout out to everybody in the chat. We got so many sharp people here rocking with us. Axel Fox says, dude, good shit. People charge for this kind of insight. Keep up the good work. Easy to tell you really love the fight game. Oh, it is true, my man. Each and every week talking about all the fights on the card. You know, I try and give the fighters the attention, energy, effort that they deserve. Also, the audience, the viewers, the people that are here rocking with me, try and give you guys my very best each and every show. And there's always more great fights to talk about. So that's why I urge every one of you guys, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, drop a like on this video if you've enjoyed the content. If you guys have questions, comments, concerns, things that you want to know about the show, more that you want from the channel, anything like that, please go ahead and drop that in the comments below. And I also have a poll up on the channel. If you guys want to contribute to what you're going to see later on this week, I'm going to make another video outside of the Thursday stream. And so I'm asking for your guys' input on what you would like to see. And that is up on my page. So without further ado, let's talk about Zhalgas Zhumagulov taking on Joshua Van. And I got to come clean here. Joshua Van. I'm not super familiar with this gentleman. He is ranked number 4 in the Southwest, number 3 in Texas, according to Tapology, fighting out of 4 Ounce Fight Club. I believe that's where Daniel Pineda trained out of as well. That is correct. Steve Garcia. So a number of different guys there. Houston, Texas-based fighter here. And it seems like he's put together a pretty good record. Only loss on his record via submission, rear naked choke in Fury FC in 2021. So pretty recent loss. However, he's rattled off 5 wins since then. So clearly been very active. Last fought December of 2022. And now he's getting in there with Zhalgas Zhumagulov, who's got a lot more professional fights, a lot more professional experience, and a lot more at the UFC level. So going to have to obviously favor my guy Zhalgas here, not knowing a ton about his opponent. But this is one where I just got to do due diligence on this guy. Seems like he is producing finishes. You know, seems like he's getting after it. Typical of 4-ounce fight club. You know, those guys really like to get after it. This guy's never gone the distance. Just from a quick scan of his record, he did as an amateur, but not as a pro. And, you know, he just looks like he's been really getting after it, fighting tough guys with more experience than him almost the whole way out. And the guy he lost to, Devin Jackson, is 3-0 as a professional. Last fought in September of 2022. So, you know, doesn't seem like that's anything to sneeze at. You know, I don't know anything more about the guy, Devin Jackson, except that he's 3-0, all finishes. So seems like a tough kid. And wow, he had a canceled bout against Nick Piccinini, one of New York's finest. So crazy, crazy stuff there. Former Cowboy as well from Oklahoma. So shout out to him. But ZZ Top, you know, Zhalgas, here's the real problem for me about Zhalgas too. He's minus 200 or whatever here. This is like, what, his 5th time making weight? I'm half kidding, but like he's just had so many cancellations recently. Shout out to my guy Elvis. Did Zhalgas cut weight last week? Going to look into that a little bit more. Feel like he probably was cutting weight, you know, certainly preparing. And yeah, I think that this could be a little bit of a hype train on our guy Zhalgas. But, you know, I also think Zhalgas, he does have 300,000 followers. You know, he is a guy that's fought a lot of high-level guys inside and outside the UFC. So I don't know that he's necessarily as disposable as some guy that they just brought in for the first time this weekend. But, you know, it's a fair point by you guys as well. You know, it could be an overinflated price. And price is everything, you know. So Big Bird, our guy, says that loss to Devin Jackson will age like fine wine. Shout out. Hopefully we see Devin Jackson get back active here. Yeah, I like Z here. Don't feel like his record in the UFC reflects how good he is. A couple really tough decision losses. Absolutely agree. MMA Locker, does Dumas win this weekend? Shout out to my guy, MMA Locker Room, guys. Do Pub Sports Radio with my guy Locker Room each and every Saturday night. And he just did an interview with SD Dumas. So if you guys like Fight Week interviews, if you guys are trying to, you know, make sure that you stay up to date with your fighter information, Dumas is doing the interview with my guy MMA Locker Room. So make sure you check that out and show some love to my guy Mills. Always appreciate when you show love to the people that support the show. And my guy Mills has been a longtime supporter. So appreciate each and every one of you guys, and Mills included. Next up, folks, we got Trevor Peek taking on Chepe Mariscal. And Chepe is a guy that I'm going to have to refresh my notes on. But he's a guy that he's fought a lot of names you've heard of. So he's come up in my tape studies before, folks, you know. One thing I always like to do, I have all my my files, my fighter profiles, everything that I have kind of just assembled in a drive. And I search through it. And I'll search somebody's name. And it might come up in 10 different profiles, right? Because guys like Chepe Mariscal, they fought a Sean Soriano in the UFC. They fought a Steve Garcia who got to the UFC. They fought a Joe Anderson Brito, got to the UFC. They fought a Yusuf Salah, got to the UFC. They fought a Pat Sabatini, got to the UFC. They fought a Carl Deaton, got to the UFC. They fought a Bryce Mitchell, got to the UFC. Are you guys getting the picture? They fought a Gregor Gillespie, got to the UFC. All right? Chepe Mariscal is a guy that puts it on the line, okay? You don't get a, you know, a call up to the UFC with a 13-6 record very often, right? And there was a time when that probably never happened, period. But these days in the UFC, if you bring the fire, if you want to get out there and scrap, if you're a tough guy, if you're willing to put it on the line, you know, then they'll bring you in. You know, it doesn't matter what your record is these days, right? It's not UFC anymore. It's UFC LFA, it's UFC Cage Warriors, it's UFC, you know, whatever Fight Pass farm that they're building. And God bless them for it, right? It's a business at the end of the day. They make a lot of money. They obviously know their business. Shout out to our guy Diehard MMA as well. Rocking with us, Clint says Chepe is tough as fuck. Excuse me, AF. He probably wouldn't say that. He's a nice family man with kids, but engages in a car crash. This fight is going to be fun. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that this is a fight where, you know, Chepe, he puts it on the line, right? Let's look at those 6 losses, right? He's got lost by decision to Soriano, lost by knockout to Steve Garcia. But we've seen Steve Garcia has been absolutely shadow realming people recently, so can't really fault him there. Joe Anderson Brito shadow realmed him. I've been telling everybody about how powerful this guy Joe Anderson Brito is for a while. Now he's getting this short notice replacement. We're going to get zero value on this line, unfortunately. But Joe Anderson Brito versus Andre Fili, one of my bets that will live in infamy. All the people in my comments section were telling me how Fili's the parlay piece of the week. And that fight wasn't a minute and a half. Joe Anderson Brito's got that power to shut somebody's lights off, and he did the exact same thing to Chepe, just dropped him there. So, when you look at decision loss to Bryce Mitchell, when you look at a loss to Gregor Gillespie, again, these are things that we could really forgive, but it's all going to be contextual. It's all going to be what I see when I go back and watch, because I haven't watched Chepe in a while. I actually watched him beat Pat Sabatini. That was one of the ones I went back and watched, and it's arguable that he did. So it's not like his grappling is piss poor, right? That's not the problem. But I think that his striking is probably better early in the fight and probably fades out a little bit late. So for me, the guy who the UFC would really like to see develop and do well is a guy like Trevor Peek, right? And when you've got a guy that maybe doesn't have the full well-rounded skill set. Interesting. My guy Clint says he wasn't all out. Very poor stoppage. Interesting. So I'll have to check that out. I definitely know Chepe to be a very tough guy to take on a lot of damage. So, it's possible that he could survive here. But again, this is a guy, Trevor Peek, that's going for the knockouts fully. He's all in, swinging wild bombs, wild hammers, not normal. Really, you'll see it from time to time, but really not normal for a guy at lightweight to have 8 wins by knockout in a row to start his career. And he's just a real hammer with those strikes. He has 1 decision win as an amateur against Tevin Brown in 2019 after losing via split decision to the same gentleman. And he's split wins and losses on the amateur scene with David Clark as well. But since he's gone pro, everything's gone his way. He fought David Robbins, who was 7-0-1. He fought Kama Worthy, who, I believe my guy Clint, were you involved with the matchmaking there, or the odds making or something? Or am I thinking of Cody Safdie? But either way, I know somebody in the community was involved with that fight, and they were talking about it on one of their programs. And, Kama Worthy, good fighter, just really doesn't have a great chin. So Trevor Peek was able to get the win there. I do think that was my guy Clint, if my memory serves, because I remember he had a little bit of that inside knowledge coming in on our guy Peek. Malik Lewis, that was a fine win. Really didn't tell us very much, I didn't think. And then the Eric Gonzalez win. Does it look clean? Does it look technical? Does it look proper? No, but he can really knock people the hell out. And I do think that he's probably the more dangerous guy. He's probably just a little bit more, laser focused, zoned in, violent from second one. And I think that Chepe is definitely the more experienced, well-rounded guy. But this is also the first camp from Peak where he's going to be training full-time. As best I understand, the guy was working a full-time job, and this is his first full-time training camp as a professional MMA fighter. So, probably going to see a better performance from Peak here, but also can't really, advocate laying chalk on a guy who is just so raw and inexperienced. He's green. I think more often than not, he wins this fight by knockout, but I think that the better play is probably that somebody eventually gets finished here. I just don't see either one of these guys having the cardio to go 15 minutes at the pace of fight that Peak seems to want to force out there. He just wants to fight like an absolute dog to the bitter end. And my guy Clint says, sharp as ever, Liam. I did help with the odds on Peak, and I've been on the train since. Shortchanged him and learned my lesson. Dude, what I think is, you probably had it right in terms of skill for skill. Kama Worthy's way better, but this guy Peak's a dog, and he really wants it bad. And that's normally what Chepe brings to the table, right? He's a dog. He wants it bad. He's not going to quit. He really wants to be in there, but he just might be a little bit out athlete here. So I think it's an interesting one. Elevation Fight Team represent, certainly more well-known than Agogi Combatives, but I think Peak is a dangerous guy, and he's an interesting character, and I think he could regionally be important for the UFC. They just had their guy Bryce Mitchell take the L. Maybe they want to see their guy Trevor Peek take one more step in the right direction. So it'll be a fun fight, but leaning towards Trevor Peek here. Next up, Jamal Emmers taking on Jack Jenkins. We got 3 fights left, guys. We're powering on through. Just got to fix my charger here. It doesn't seem to be plugged in for whatever reason. Sorry about that. Y'all are seeing the show being made right in front of you. Technical difficulties and everything. So appreciate that. We've got Jamal Emmers and Jack Jenkins here. And Jamal Emmers, 33 years of age, almost 34 here by the time this fight's going to roll around. He's going to be 3 inches taller, have a 6-inch reach advantage here. So this is an interesting one because last time out, Jamal Emmers seemed like nobody wanted to play him. And it's hard when you got a guy coming back off a catastrophic knee injury. It can be really hard to know what to expect in that next performance from the guy. And Jamal Emmers had a really catastrophic knee injury against Pat Sabatini. If you guys go back and rewatch that fight, it was brutal to watch. He hurt Pat Sabatini so bad, hurt him so bad. Pat was hurt. He went down, and Pat's just so good on the ground, man. He was able to recover, get into a leg exchange, and if you are in transition, if you are not locked down in an ashigarami, in some kind of like solid leg entanglement, some kind of saddle, some kind of 50-50, like you need to have some real attachment to your opponent in order to, establish a threat with that toe hold and keep yourself safe. But what ended up happening was Emmers tried to go for the toe hold as Pat Sabatini had a pretty solid bite on the leg. And so Pat Sabatini said, okay, you want to go for the toe hold. You guys got to remember the toe hold, anything that you're talking about basically in martial arts, it's whatever you're saying, it's almost like talking about the limb above it when you're talking about breaking mechanics in jiu-jitsu. Like a heel hook isn't really going to hurt my heel. It's going to hurt my knee, right? Same thing with a toe hold. It's not really designed to hurt my toes, though it could do that. It's really more designed to like twist the foot and the ankle, and put somebody in a lot of pain. So it's more of a pain hold than anything. And you could definitely get people to tap with it. You could create serious damage, with torque and leverage and holding down the knee and everything. But it's really low percentage compared to something like a heel hook where if I have the right braking mechanics, the knee is going to be destroyed every time. It's a catastrophic move. So that I think is really what highlighted a continuous flaw in the career of Jamal Emmers, which he's a very talented fighter. He's got a lot of high-level skills. He just doesn't always make the best decisions on fight night. Sometimes it costs him. Sometimes he's gotten finished. Sometimes he's dropped the ball in really big opportunities. And so when you got a guy like Jack Jenkins, who's going to come in here very hungry, who's going to come in here with dangerous calf kicks, and test that structural integrity of the knee for sure. And he's, probably got a decent sprawl and brawl game here that he can leverage, decent front headlock series. So I got to revisit some of his tape. Jack Jenkins obviously hasn't fought at the highest level for very long here. 11-2 as a pro, beat Don Shainis in the UFC at a pay-per-view nonetheless. And he got a finish in round 3 on the Contender Series. So he's a guy who's willing to put in the work over the course of 15 minutes. He's not afraid of that kind of longer drawn-out fight. Emmers last time out went to 15 minutes. It just seemed like that was an opponent that he really could have and should have probably finished. He was probably playing it very conservative to just make sure he got a win, keep on the winning track. Lost a very close split decision that could have went his way against Giga Chadze back in the day. I thought that fight probably was Giga's, but it was very, very close, and it could have easily been Jamal's as well. So, he kind of just got a tough break there. But Giga is a guy that, really was very green at the time in MMA. And we've seen that, after that Calvin Kattar fight, he hasn't come back since. So, he kind of got humbled there a little bit. I think that, when we're looking at a guy like Jamal, I can't trust him as a big favorite, man. I just can't do that, especially somebody who is dangerous, in Jack Jenkins, who's shown that he can go the full 15 and keep it honest. I think that the better guy, if you were saying Jamal Emmert's minus 125, minus 130, minus 145, I kind of get that. But I think Jack Jenkins is superior to Hussein Ashkabov. I really do. So I just have to lean towards Jack Jenkins being the value side here. But, I'm not thrilled either to play either side. I just don't think Hussein Ashkabov and Vince Cachero is minus 250 in the UFC worthy. But who's got the better work outside the UFC? You'd probably argue that goes to Jamal Emmert. Does have a win over Corey Sandhagen in 2017 back in the day. So he's had some impressive wins. A win over Alexander Hernandez as well when they were both 2-2 back in 2013. Lost to Thiago Moises in round 5. So no losses that really stand out as terrible, but I do think Jamal Emmers is the guy who's a little bit more suspect to me. I think Jack Jenkins is going to fight hard for your dollar. And if he gets outskilled by the longer, taller guy here, it happens. But I think he's going to try and cut him down with calf kicks to keep him in place. And then I think he's going to open up with some boxing combinations. So it'd probably be a dog or pass situation for me. My guy J. Cole MMA, shout out, says, Emmers as a favorite, always risky with his fight IQ. Could not agree more, my man. He says, has the skills to perform better than he usually does. Absolutely. And you want guys that perform up to or above their potential, not guys that are underperforming your expectations. And I thought against Hussein Ashkabov, it's a fight Emmers had to have. And I thought it was one that he really could have won inside the distance. Shout out to my guy, Shady Beach Bum, says, glad to see you solo and rotating different people. Appreciate that. David Bonner says, new to the stream. What's up, David? Welcome, my man. We're talking all the fights on the card. As soon as this is over, I'm going to try and go back and timestamp it because we are getting towards the beginning. But don't think that we are slowing down, my man. We're getting started here because my favorite fighter on the fight card is up next, guys. Tatsuro Taira taking on Kleydson Rodrigues at 125 pounds, talking about a flyweight prospect banger. This is good stuff here, guys. Tatsuro Taira, 13-0 as a professional, and I really have been rocking with Tatsuro Taira. He came to the UFC. He was very unheralded. People weren't really paying attention to, what this guy was doing in Shuto. And I went back and I watched his tape. I went deep on this guy's tape because he's young and he's a guy that I think has a bright future in the organization. So those are the guys I prioritize doing my tape study. When somebody's 38, 39, 40 years of age, these kind of things, there's nothing wrong with that. But am I going to invest the time to go back and watch the fights they had when they were 25 and catalog those? No, it's not really my priority right now. But guys that are young on the come up, those are the guys that I really want to make sure that I iron out those tape studies. And so Tatsuro Taira, I've gone very deep on this guy. I have to do more due diligence on the Kleydson Rodrigues side. However, I think that when you're dealing with somebody like Tatsuro Taira, you're dealing with really exceptional talent. I think we saw that in his UFC debut, and I think we've seen that in subsequent fights. So let's look at his record, and I'll talk through each of these fights in the UFC. First and foremost, notice he doesn't come through the Contender Series, right? This is a guy in Tatsuro Taira that they signed and just brought right into a UFC fight night. He was supposed to take on Carlos Candelario. Candelario gets sick. He pulls out of the fight, and he schedules it again for a week later. Then, or 2 weeks later, excuse me. Then Candelario goes out there, fights him to a decision, but it was a unanimous decision for Taira. I thought in round 3, it was arguably a 10-8 round. He was on his back. He was dominating with big shots. He has good ground and pound, excellent technique. So basically, Taira, with the exception of putting his head into some guillotines, attempting takedowns, he was safe in all those guillotine situations, but he just took some time. He was very patient in those positions. You want to see him be a little bit more assertive, but he doesn't make mistakes. He really takes his time in those positions and judiciously decides what's the next best way to get out of here. And then he does that. In terms of what I like about the guy, let's talk about the fact that he's got very fast hands on the feet. he doesn't often play around on the feet. He likes to go for body lock takedowns. He likes to mix it up in the clinch. He's even not afraid at times to pull guard because he's got exceptional back takes from the full guard. He's got sweeps. He's got very interesting techniques as well as threats from the bottom. He can submit you at triangle chokes and arm bars. He's got great series off of his back, but he's not a guy that likes to play off of his back for very long. He likes to try and get on top of people. He likes to try and mix it up. He likes to try and scramble, and if it's not working, he'll normally work his way back up to his feet and then work from there. What I've seen from Taira that I've loved is his transition grappling, the speed at which he moves, the speed at which he reacts, the ability to finish fights when he hurts people. He's hurt people regionally and instantly locked in the rear naked choke. I love to see that kind of finishing ability and intensity. And so I think that Tatsuro Taira is a handful for a guy like Kleydson Rodrigues, who really, really struggled against CJ Vergara. And you'll remember, guys, Tatsuro Taira absolutely cleaned up CJ Vergara. That was not a very competitive fight in the end. CJ was able to land maybe a handful of strikes, but really I felt like Tatsuro Taira has, shown his class in recent performances. And I thought that Aguilar performance was just stunning. This is a guy that, he's been minus 1,000, in the UFC fight, right? And he's only three fights into the dance. A lot of money's coming in, it would appear to me, on the Kleydson Rodrigues side. And listen, I can understand why. You've got Kleydson Rodrigues here as a 8-2 fighter, so he's clearly quite talented. And you look, the only loss he had in the UFC, split decision to CJ Vergara. A lot of people thought it should have went his way. So again, can we fault Kleydson Rodrigues? No, you can only fight the people you're given. But Santo Curatolo is a guy I think Tatsuro Taira, would probably clean up. I think he's a tough enough guy, but 6-4 overall. And, he's been finished in 3 of his 4 losses. The only guy to not finish him, Kleydson Rodrigues. Shannon Ross, that win doesn't tell me anything. I think Tatsuro Taira would tie Shannon Ross into 3 knots in the first round. So again, it's not to discredit any of these guys, but I just think it's a levels fight. And I think Tatsuro Taira is more experienced. I think he's better. I think he's faster. I think he's more dynamic. I think he's more interesting. I think he's more marketable. And I think he's better on the ground. So I think Tatsuro Taira is probably going to submit this guy. But I also don't think that people should be surprised at all if Tatsuro Taira pounds this guy out on the ground. Because the other thing I noted is CJ Vergara mounted this gentleman. And if you're getting mounted by CJ Vergara, you're probably going to be in a world of trouble against Tatsuro Taira. That's my honest opinion. So Shannon Ross wins don't tell me much, and I think Taira is a better prospect. I think he rates better, and I think he's going to get the win. That does it. We've got 1 fight left, so very fun and excited to see. David, I would ask you, my man, any comments that you have on the main event. I'll try and, in fact, star a couple of these so I could go back and revisit them after I talk about the last fight on the card here. I did talk about that fight off the rip, but I will be happy to address any questions that you guys have either at the end of this stream or if you guys want to drop them in the comment section below. I'm happy to address those after the stream as well. So appreciate you guys. I think that Tatsuro by finish is my read there to close the book on that fight. Next up, we've got Cody Brundage and Cedriques Dumas. And this is the Twitter FC main event of the week, right, guys? Everybody wants to talk about this fight for whatever reason. Overall, it's a really sloppy middleweight fight. We talk about them very often. I think that Cody Brundage is a good hammer. I think he's a bad nail. He's got wins that have aged all right, like the Tresean Gore win. But that's about it, right? Been knocked out in the first round by Oleksiejczuk. That's a forgivable loss, I suppose. Submission win in submission loss in the second round against Adolfo Vieira. Not a great look. He basically had Adolfo completely out, went for a guillotine like a bonehead, which I think he would agree to. And then, it was tough. So I'm not trying to kick dirt on him, man. But again, it's like, he just made a really bad decision. Do I want to trust that guy with my money as a big chalk favorite? No. especially when he's getting guillotined, when he's getting choked, when he's getting put in these bad situations, when he's getting knocked out by William Knight of all people. No, 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 no. So I think that for me, Cody Brundage is just unplayable at chalk. Appreciate you, Sigma. Says, yo, why you so handsome? Don't know, but I appreciate you saying so. You might be the only person here who thinks so, so appreciate you, Sigma. But back to the fight. Cody Brundage, the win against Dalcha looked terrible until he won, right? It was like going ham hocks on the feet until somebody fell over. Tresean Gore fight, I thought Tresean Gore was landing, more effectively and then just got cold cocked and knocked out. More power to him. He definitely has power. But then Nick Maximoff, guy who didn't stick around in the UFC for very long, gets the decision win over him on short notice. Okay, forgivable, except that then you get finished twice in a row. You get finished by William Knight. Just how good are you? Lost to Brian Battle on the regional scene, lost to Dalton Rasta. Two guys that are very talented. It's just, where is this guy's ceiling? Where is he really going? I think he's got decent skills, but I think Dumas is the more dangerous guy here. I think Dumas is also Dumas is a guy that, the last fight he had, right, against Fremd, I thought Fremd was probably being undervalued. He had some UFC experience. He's a tough, durable guy. He could stick in there with guys like Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, who've got great cardio, who've got finishing ability, and he didn't get finished, and he kept it honest, even on short notice, I believe. So I knew that Fremd was a tough guy who's going to make that an honest fight. I don't even know that Cody Brundage has a reliable 15 minutes in him. Much less that he could do it against somebody dangerous like Dumas, who's got kicks, who's got punches, who's got strikes, who's got guillotines, who's got chokes. So I think Dumas does look bad on the ground. I do think that it's possible that happens here. But I'm just saying, I think going to be hard to explode in on a guy with a 7-inch reach advantage, says my guy Clint. I totally agree. I think that the younger guy here, who's the bigger fellow, and who's also got some, finishing ability of his own, is something to keep in mind here. I'm not ruling out Brundage. I think somebody's probably getting submitted here, but I just don't think Brundage is going to do the submitting at like a 100% clip. I think Dumas has long arms. He's got the kind of reach that creates guillotine opportunities. Brundage can get hurt and put his head in bad situations. We've seen that in TKO losses. I think that, Dumas at chalk was a really tough play, especially hindsight. And I think a lot of people got burnt, with all respect, but I also think that maybe this is the time to get back on the train, because I do think that, Brundage has significant chalk coming off 2 straight finish losses. That's really surprising. He's 65% implied here against a guy who's way bigger than him. He does know how to wrestle. That's for sure. But again, you would think he had a wrestling advantage against Oleksiejczuk, and it just didn't turn out, right? He just ended up getting finished there. So I just want to say, approach this one with some caution. It's a shitty, sloppy middleweight fight. But I don't think that, Dumas should just be left for dead. UFC jitters are real. Dumas could have just got completely frozen by the moment, So I would be curious to see what performance we get here. But I'll tell you what, Dumas is probably going to be pissed. He's probably going to come out here with a lot of aggression, a lot of emotion. So I think this fight probably ends up finishing. I don't think we're going to need the judges for this one. I don't think we're going to need 3 rounds here, to tell you the truth. Guys, we did it. 14 fights down the chute. So now you know what my first look is like for UFC on ABC 5, UFC Jacksonville, UFC Emmett versus Topuria. I want you guys to drop any questions, comments, concerns that you have either in that comment section below if you've had enough of me, or if you guys have a couple more questions for me. I will be fielding them until 1:45. So we got a little over 10 minutes to still be rocking live. 63 people still rocking with us. So appreciate each and every one of you guys. If you haven't already, make sure you get subscribed to the channel. We do a lot of talking about fights on this channel. That's all that we do on this channel. We're not going to pester you with nothing else. So appreciate everybody for the support. All the combat sports fans out there, a lot of great things to talk about, whether that's on this fight card, fight cards to come in the future. You guys can ask me questions about Bellator, PFL, whatever, I'll always give you guys an honest answer. If I know the fighters involved, if I feel confident talking about them, I will. And if I don't, I'll let you know that too. If I know one side, I'll tell you what I know about them. But if I don't, I'll let you know that too. So always just going to get my best, right? I'll give you exactly what I have, but I won't give you what I don't have. I won't be selling you guys some snake oil. I'll just tell you exactly the things that I have opinions on. So any questions you guys have, please go ahead and fire those away. In the meantime, just going to recap briefly for the homies that weren't here. You know, my gut leans for this fight card. I'll run through them for you. I think Ilia Topuria is probably going to get it done. I think he's probably going to get it done violently in the first couple rounds. I understand why there's betting value on our guy Josh Emmett, but personal opinion, I just think Ilia, younger guy, fresher, wants it better right now. I think Chalk's going to roll in the main event. The co-main event, I think Maycee Barber represents a live underdog. I'm an Amanda Ribas fan, just like the rest of you guys. I think she's a great fighter. I think she's very dangerous. But I also think that Maycee Barber presents some physical, stylistic challenges. I think she could come on late in the fight, come on strong. So I think maybe it's best to enter live after round one. I do think it's very possible Ribas comes out here and establishes herself early, gets some takedowns. But I think that the later that this fight goes, the more interesting it gets for Maycee Barber. She's put on a lot of round three performances, a lot of round three rallies. And I do think that Amanda Ribas sometimes can lose sight of the ball in her fights. We saw that against Marina Rodrigues. She was looking great. And then all of a sudden, she just fell off the cliff and got caught there in a fight that she was otherwise doing well. So this is a good test, a good ground marker to see if Amanda Ribas can really cut it in this flyweight division, or if she's got to go back to the strawweight division where she made her name. Next up, main card, Austen Lane and Justin Tafa, guys. That was a fight where I'm ultimately leaning towards some slight value on the underdog Austen Lane, but I think somebody's probably getting finished here. I think that Austen Lane, pretty green for a guy who's got 15 pro fights, but now or never, 35 years of age, probably got the better athletic background here, and he's a guy that is from the local area. Maybe the UFC is trying to put him in a position to succeed. I think the main card bout between Onama and Santos is an absolute banger. Got to lean towards Santos here, but a good fight, and I think both guys are going to bring it. Onama maybe a little bit too wide of a dog there, but I think Santos probably has the ground game advantage here and the cardio advantage. Brendan Allen, I think, is the superior fighter. He's the younger guy, a little bit fresher, wants to be there, but Bruno Silva presents some of those stylistic challenges that we talked about, the knockout power. So not sleeping on Bruno Silva, but leaning towards Brendan Allen to get the job done. I think that gut lean, I'm going to have to go with Phil Rowe here. I just feel like Neil Magny hasn't been the same lately. Feel like we haven't been seeing his best product, but step down in competition. We could easily see the old Neil Magny here rear his ugly head. I'm just kidding. Neil Magny, handsome individual. But I think overall, this is a fight where Phil Rowe is probably, a little bit fresher and a little bit better positioned. Plus, he's got some jiu-jitsu in his back pocket. I think whoever gets on top could really dictate exchanges here. And I think Phil Rowe just presents some interesting challenges as an underdog. I think Randy Brown's going to beat Wellington Turman, but interested to see how he fares at this new weight class, 170 pounds. For a guy who's already had some chin issues, coming down in weight doesn't always help. But yeah, I think it should be fun. At least Mateusz Rebecki, my doppelganger, if some people are to be believed, rooting for him. I think he's going to get the job done via submission, but should be a fun fight. Our Tajik brother Loic, been very tough and hard to put away historically. Tabatha Ricci and Gillian Robertson going to be going down in the 115-pound division. Gillian, definitely the more UFC-tested girl, very tough girl, but kind of just gut lean that Tabatha Ricci has a couple more paths to winning this fight. I think that she could potentially stuff some takedowns here, keep this on the feet, make it interesting, or get some takedowns of her own. But again, greasy kind of women's 115 fight. I think the size advantage of Gillian Robertson could pay dividends. So I want to almost see those two girls face off a little bit. Zhalgas Zhumagulov and Joshua Van. Got to do more due diligence, guys. Zhalgas is the pick because I know him and I know that he's a good, tough fighter, well-rounded skills, but Joshua Van looks pretty good on paper. Looks like a guy who doesn't have that much professional experience, but starting to put it together. So going to have to do my tape study and get back to you guys. Trevor Peek is my lean against Chepe Mariscal, but again, This is a volatile fight. This is a fight card where I'm leaning more towards these fights aren't going to decision a lot of the time than I am towards one side or the other in a lot of ways, because we've got some really violent, volatile fights with pretty low-level fighters with glaring holes in their game. Trevor Peek, no real ground game to speak of, only been a professional fighter for one camp. So a lot to see here, but I think Peek is probably the side. Emmers taking on Jenkins. I lean towards the Jenkins side here. Younger guy, just think he's a little bit more dangerous with those calf kicks, a little bit better decision maker, a little bit more likely to mix in some of that process, the takedowns, the clinch game, the low kicks, and the boxing combinations in tight. So should be good stuff. Shout out to my guy, Alex the General Ramirez, says, press the like button. Appreciate when you do. Shout out to you guys. Simple support, like liking this, dropping a comment on it, subscribing to the channel. Really easy, free ways to show love and support, and I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Tatsuro Taira is my lean. I think he's going to get it done in the first 2 rounds. I just think he's on a different level. I think Kleidson's a good fighter. I think he's going to win more fights in the UFC. I just don't think that he's the kind of guy that's going to be able to stand up to somebody like Tatsuro Taira right now with his skill, with his abilities. So that's how I feel. And I think for the last fight, it's a fun fight. It's a fight where, again, my heaviest lean would be towards this fight, not go into decision. I think these two guys are going to be violent and get after it, but I actually lean towards the Dumas side here. I just, I got to go with my gut, right? And my gut, as soon as I saw this fight was announced, was, Dumas might lose every second of this fight until he guillotines this guy, but I just have a weird feeling he's going to win this fight and finish. So, yeah, I'm leaning towards Dumas. I agree with my guy, Matt R. Taira, best bowl cut in the game, no doubt. The guy's bought me many cheeseburgers, so shout out to our guy, Tatsuro Taira. Probably my most profitable fighter, if not my most. He's in my top 5, 100%. So shout out to Tatsuro Taira. Keep sleeping on the kid. He just keeps printing. Uncle Weezy says, what's good, Liam? Shout out to Uncle Weezy. A lot of great friends of the show. Jewish Better, Uncle Weezy, Clint. So many friends of the show have been popping in, dropping in with great commentary, joining the sharpest chat in the game. So appreciate each and every one of you guys to contribute. Wouldn't have a great show like this without such a sharp chat like everybody contributes to. So thank you guys all very much for your contributions to the show. If you guys have any final questions, we got 3 minutes left to wrap this bad boy up. But again, just wanted to say points of emphasis this week. I'm going to be looking at props as they open up on domestics. Going to be sharing that information as I have it in the Lab VIP. All the information that you would need is in the description box below if you're so inclined. You guys can find me everywhere on social media at Liam Picks Fights. That's on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere like that. I appreciate the support on those platforms. You can find me on Facebook too if you're so inclined. I'm still learning the ropes a little bit. Not the most tech savvy guy. So if there's ever a delay before one of these streams, just know I'm here trying to plug in cameras and all this stuff, trying to figure it out because I love talking fights. I don't love doing all the tech stuff on the back end, but you guys are the reason I do it. It's the reason it makes it worth it. All the people that are here rocking with me live, all the people that catch it on replay, all the people that download the podcast. If you guys are looking for an easy way to support me, guys, I'm looking for more people to subscribe to the podcast. We have so many people that support us here on YouTube, and I appreciate each and every one of you guys. But I know that a lot of you guys are like me and your audio files, and half the time you prefer to listen to this stuff on audio anyway. So even if you guys don't end up listening to this show on audio right now, no problem. But if you guys could subscribe to the show, if you could rate it, if you could give it a review on the major platforms, so huge for the growth. And I put a lot of time, effort, and energy into the show, into the content, into all the stuff that we do. And so I just wanted to thank you guys for your support and also ask you, if you haven't already, supporting me on podcasts would be so critical. That's been a slow point of growth for me, but looking to just keep hammering away, keep making the show available in more places, bringing more content to the table, doing more. And that's the focus that I have, in the weeks and months ahead. So like I said, if you're not subscribed already, make sure that you do. We got lots of great content coming your way in the near future. Shout out to our guy, David Banner, new listener to the show, I believe, says, I had a comment about Cheeto and Sugar Sean earlier. Curious if you think it's good or a garbage take. So what's your take, David? Go ahead and fire it for me, and I got you. Also, I did star your comment before. You said this is a good fight for Ilia. Let me bring this up on screen. This is a good fight for Ilia. Every fight I watched, Emmett is in a brawl fact. And he had problems with Chinny Burgos. Oh, damn, that's our local guy here in Section 9, brother. No, I'm playing. He's only getting older, and Ilia is no slouch. Won't stick around long to get like this. Yeah, man. Totally agree. You know, when you think about this, I think that, man, here you're talking about a guy in Josh Emmett who's been in a lot of really close fights, and he's overperformed. I told people all the way up on this underdog run, I was like, man, this guy Josh Emmett is just a tank as an underdog. He has overperformed. And I have receipts on this. This is one of my favorite picks ever on a fight, because I said in my pick that I was taking Calvin Kattar by split decision over Josh Emmett. And I said the betting value was on Josh Emmett plus 160. Guys, this is the reason why. If you want a simple distillation of why you can't just pick winners in this game, I said exactly what I thought was going to happen. I said exactly who I thought was going to win. And after watching it, I still thought the same guy should have won, which is Calvin Kattar. And you know who they gave it to? Josh Emmett. And so if you don't get used to betting on value in this game, you'll have your heart broken so many times. Because the thing was, it was too close to call at a plus 160, right? Then it's a fine bet, you know? But at plus 105, Josh Emmett wouldn't have had any value there because Calvin Kattar looked like a minus 130, no doubt. So it's about numbers, right? It's not just about who the fighter is and whether you think they're going to win. It's about how close it's going to be, right? And I think that in this kind of fight, who's got more paths to the victory? You know, I'd be pretty surprised if Josh Emmett submitted Ilia Topuria, unless it's in the third, fourth, or fifth round and Ilia Topuria is completely death-gassed. I think that I would not be surprised if Ilia Topuria submitted Josh Emmett in rounds 1 through 5. You know, if his cardio checks out, I wouldn't be surprised if he submitted him at any point. And early going, I favor him in the grappling outright. Would I be surprised if Ilia Topuria knocked out Josh Emmett in the first 3 rounds? Not at all. Would I be surprised if Josh Emmett knocked out Ilia Topuria? No, I would not. So there is where I think Josh Emmett has the best chance to win, is via knockout, where it's a little bit more honest of a fight. But then when I think about, you know, who do I think could win this fight by decision? I think it's kind of a theoretical toss-up. You know, I thought that Josh Emmett was slowing down considerably in his last fight. Was that just a function of damage? Yeah, I think probably. But, you know, do I think that Ilia could put comparable damage on him in 15 minutes? Sure. I definitely think that that's possible. So, you know, this is just for me a fight where I think Ilia brings a lot to the table. I think he's a really dangerous guy. And I think there's still some unknowns on the table that make it so Josh Emmett is a playable plus 250. But I also just have my own gut instinct. I've also been around the game for a long time, and I just have my own opinions here. And I think Ilia Topuria is too much right now for Josh Emmett. And I think the motivation, I think the line, a lot of things are pointing me to Ilia being the side. So that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it. David says, okay, so I said that by booking O'Malley and Cheeto on the same UFC wants to build a rematch or strip Cheeto of legitimacy for taking O'Malley's 0. By the way, Cheeto was fucking up Sean. I don't know how people see it. So it's interesting. Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I thought Cheeto was beating Sean that night. I thought he was winning that fight. I also thought it was, you know, a pretty tepid pace, all things considered. Then he had the injury. Then Cheeto kind of like turned up on him. You know, he's not really a guy who normally goes for that first round finish, but that brought it out of him, right? I think that when you're dealing with, you know, what the UFC wants, I think it's very clear. UFC wants O'Malley, right? They like the O'Malley story. They like this guy, big talker, draws a lot of eyeballs, draws a lot of attention, mainstream appeal. He just does everything right now. You know, he's checking a lot of the right boxes, even appealing to a younger demographic. Boy, oh boy, if you want to know what the UFC wants right now, younger demographic, big time. Just because you got to get that next crop of fans in. Always, always, always. And I think that it's interesting because I don't think this is a favorable matchup for Cheeto, right? I mean, Henry Cejudo, I guess Cheeto could knock him out, but like barring a knockout, it seems like a really tough fight for Cheeto Vera. You know, Henry Cejudo, difficult guy to deal with in the clinch, difficult guy to deal with on the feet, very fast, very strong, very nimble, going to be much better in tune with his body and his competition preparation, I would think, after coming back for the last fight. And, Cheeto, he's a guy that's done a lot of things right, but he got absolutely audited in his last fight, like big time audited. And I think the UFC took note of that, and they may just be saying, we've invested a lot of time, effort, and dollars in this guy. Maybe we're not getting exactly where we want. So now it's Esser or get off the pot time. Put him in there with another title eliminator type fight. And if he doesn't win this one, maybe he moves to the back of the line for a while. But if he does, it's a huge opportunity. Beat the former champ, get on the same level as the guys in the main event. So for me, I feel like it's a win-win for the UFC, to answer your question, David. I think that they're thinking of this as, it creates multiple iterations where win and loss don't matter in the main and the co-main or the main and the featured bout or whatever it's going to be in terms of card placement. Because, let's say that O'Malley and Cheeto both lose. Easy to rebook, easy to rebook those two guys in a fight. Easy to rebook Henry and Aljo, right? Nothing wrong with that. Or conversely, let's say Sugar wins, right? And Henry wins. Now it's the Battle of Arizona that they were trying to get in the first place with Aljo and Henry going down before Sugar, right? So for me, I think the UFC just has a lot of options at 135. It's just an embarrassment of riches in the division, and I think it's going to be a great fight. But yeah, I agree with my guy Gerardo. I absolutely think Cejudo can take Cheeto down. So it's a question of can Cheeto submit him or knock him out or, extend him or, he's got to really figure out some creative way to win the fight. And I think he's going to struggle to do that personally. So that'll do it, folks. I think that if we have any other questions, comments, concerns, please, guys, go ahead. Don't be shy. Throw them in the comment section below this chat. You guys will see I go back and answer all the comments, even if it's not the night of. I try and get to them in the days after the stream. So if you guys have questions just about general process, hey, I'm curious about betting. I'm curious about line shopping. I'm curious about what you talk about on the show, whatever it is, any questions that you guys have, any comments that you have, any favorite bets that you're looking at this week, whatever it is, anything you want to get off your chest, go ahead and drop it below the video. Be happy to address those comments as well. I truly appreciate everybody for the support. Had a lot of kind words, positive feedback on last week's show. We had Saeed Yakub Kakramanov, first former UFC fighter on the stream. He gave out that Daniel Argueta money line, and I think by fight time he ended up changing his mind. But Dan Argueta went out there and absolutely was steamrolling Ronnie Lawrence, looking like $1 million. Referee stops the fight. Can't win them all, but felt like we had a lot of really good reads last week. If you guys read my article for Roto Grinders, we were hitting on a lot of cylinders. So just been very happy with how the research and how the reads have been turning out lately and getting right back after it. So this is my first look. If you guys aren't aware, Bets and Banter will be on Thursday. And we have our announcement of our guests. And guys, I'm excited to announce we have a returning friend of the show, my guy Prodigy MMA. You guys know him. You love him. He is a very prominent force on MMA Twitter, constantly dropping knowledge bombs on your head top for free. And he's also a plus EV tracked MMA third-party bettor. He's been on the show before. You guys loved him then. You'll love him again on Thursday. We're going to be going live at 7 p.m. And we're also having on, for the very first time, Finesse the Books. I'm excited, guys. Somebody who's maybe not on a lot of these MMA shows that you see week in and week out. I try and keep my show fresh. I try and keep it mixed up. I try and keep it new guests, old guests, friend of the show, people you haven't heard of. I really want you guys to enjoy this experience. So if there's somebody you want to hear from on the show that you haven't heard from already, please go ahead and drop that in the comment section below as well. If there's somebody that I'm not aware of, that I've missed, that I haven't spoken about positively, I try and support other members of the community as well. So even if you're on the come up, things like that, go ahead and reach out. We could always discuss, figure it out, and try and work together. So appreciate all you guys for the support. God bless you all. I hope that you guys enjoy those fights. I hope that you cash out on all of your bets. If you're betting, do so legally, responsibly, within your means. If you're not, enjoy those fights anyway, because there's a lot of great action to be had. And until next time, guys, come back next week, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and we'll do it all again.